TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger joins us. How are we, Dregs?
How's your moxie?
How's your moxie and your panache?
No, I'm in a technical calamity right now.
Oh, no, different angle.
Well, that's why I'm a bit late to the party here today, fellas.
I don't know.
Yeah, normally I'm in the home studio and I just flip a switch and everything comes on board. But I don't know if I forgot to update something or whatever. But anyway, mad scramble. Here I am on my phone. Are you looking at my nose?
Dog.
No, you're good.
Show us around a bit.
Yeah, where's Tiny?
Let's go.
Hold on. Well, let's have a little tour. Let's see.
I like that hoodie there.
Like.
Oh, no. She buggered off. She went to bed.
Yeah.
Tiny's in bed.
Yeah, that's all right.
Show us the smoker, maybe.
Oh, it's fine. Oh,
anything on it?
No, there's not.
Oh,
come on.
That's rare.
Snow.
Friday.
It's a Friday midday.
Let's see. Hold on.
Yeah, here we go. Oh, you guys got some snow.
Yeah, we got lots of snow. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I got going on. Yeah.
Anyway, let's say we're glad to have you either way.
Yeah.
It's what Calgary Flames and this whole Dylan Cousins. I mean, you kind of talked about it, I guess, last week, but as we're now a week away, and very curious what's going to happen with Kevin Adams and Buffalo, because you look at, Frank Seravalli brought out his list of possible trade targets. So there's Bowen Byram and JJ Paterk is on there now, and Alex Tuck and Dylan Cousins, and Jack Quinn is there. Is there anybody that's not on the potentially on the block in Buffalo? What does your senses tell you about the Sabres? Because they could be a very busy team on Friday if they choose to be.
Yeah, like why aren't we going after Owen Power or Rasmus Dahlin? I mean, go down the list, right? And I think that's a position that Kevin Adams and the Buffalo Sabres have put themselves in over year after year after year of futility, right? So you can't just close the door every time somebody makes a call or a gesture. But in the exchange that I had yesterday with Kevin, I mean, there's lots of interest around Dylan Cousins, as you'd expect, as there should be. Less around Bo Byram, but I think that just means that teams don't believe that Adams and the Buffalo Sabres are going to make that trade for the defenseman. Maybe it's a little early to trade Bo Byram. Alex Tuck, I would submit his name in the same conversation that I do with Byram and Cousins. And then, Quinn and Paterka get a little bit more intriguing, I suppose. When you look at the middle of the ice, both in what's coming and what's there, I think that's really why teams have zeroed in on the Buffalo Sabres, because they see the depth there. And, why not start with a Dylan Cousins, a piece that, there wouldn't be many teams in the league that wouldn't have called or wouldn't find a place for him. But, again, Adams remains in the position that, well, if somebody wants to blow the doors off, I've got to listen, but nobody has done that yet. And, it's not expected that that's going to happen in the next week, but you always have to keep that realm of possibility open. And that's exactly what Adams and the Buffalo Sabres are doing.
So here's the thing I keep coming back to, because we keep hearing Calgary linked to the Cousins chats. What is he? Because it's like 3 years ago, he has this breakout season. You're like, well, there he is. He's a right shot center. He's going to score 30 goals. He'll flirt with a point per game. Yeah. But then you have 2 years in a row where it's just like a half point per game. Like, it's a very different story than Trevor Zegras, but it's not completely different, because both these guys flash at 21-20, and then it's like, where'd the production go? Like, it's not as if the Buffalo Sabres are like, we're really good, we're competitive, we have to shelter them, we need to win games. Like, they suck. Why is Cousins putting up points?
Well, you could say that about a number of Buffalo Sabres players. Jack Quinn was out of the lineup early in the year. It's just kind of been a spiraling operation for a long, long time. But, to get specific to Dylan Cousins, and I can't answer why he isn't more productive. I can't. But so that, I think, is exactly why it's a real tricky scenario to move that player. If you're Adams, you want top players coming back as part of a trade, or you're not willing to consider it. But then the team that's engaging and has interest in Dylan Cousins is looking at the potential upside that he provides, but are they 100% sure that there's a whole lot more offensive production in his game? And if the answer to that is yes, well, then make your best offer. In the next week, make your best offer and see if that is good enough. But if Adams doesn't back off, and I don't believe he will in his ask of top players, is it really worth moving the pieces or a piece plus a top draft pick, a guy that you already know is a decent performer within your organization for a guy that you're still a little bit unsure of. And I think that's why we continue to speculate on Dylan Cousins, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of traction there.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot, man. Like
30 goals, 68 points 2 years ago. It's a half point per game now. Like, what happened?
I'm kind of with you. I as we sit here and we're watching the Flames, and last night they don't get a goal on Vasilevsky. And it's like, well, Morgan Frost is an RFA. He's going to need a contract at the end of the year. And I think he's a good player. I'm not sure what he's got to play with out there. I feel like it's kind of the same in Buffalo. I think that Dylan Cousins would be a guy, not that he's going to erupt like maybe Jack Eichel did when he left, different players, but I just have a feeling that that's a player who's got some more to give if he's got more around him. That's, pretty simple to say, but I don't know that I worry about Dylan Cousins so much. I think there's more that he brings than just points. I think the points go up, and in the right environment becomes captain material.
And I think that, your voice is the majority of clubs that have inquired with the Buffalo Sabres thinking the same thing. The Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, any team that's in the market for a 1 or a 2 center still have Dylan Cousins ahead of some of the other names that we've speculated on, and I would include Braden Shen in that equation. And you've got Scott Lawton for the Philadelphia Flyers. And I think it's more because you believe in the upside of Cousins, and you sure like the birth certificate, right? You like the age, you like the fact that maybe he is just coming into his own, and you give him a little bit more slack in the rope because everything that is the Buffalo Sabres that hasn't been realized into a team that is a contending playoff team, right? So you give the young player the benefit of the doubt. I just know that there are a number of clubs out there that continue to keep tabs on him, and that would be Calgary included. Calgary is at the top of the list from a media perspective because guys like me and Pierre LeBrun and you guys continue to talk about it. We just feed the beast. Calgary, Dylan Cousins, Calgary, Dylan Cousins. But the Flames aren't alone. There's a wide number of teams that are interested.
Speaking of LeBrun, I know he kind of came out with a post around the Mikko Rantanen thing, and he's like, "There's a difference between what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking. My opinion, my thoughts. If I were the Carolina Hurricanes, what I would do." It's another week, and I know we asked you about it last week. We feel like we'll probably ask you about it every week, until it's done. But any more clarity on your end as to whether it's he's going to sign, he's going to be dealt again, or they will just hang on to him and then worry about it when the time comes?
Well, first of all, I kind of chirped Pierre after that post because when I went to insider school with, Bob McKenzie was the dean.
Yeah.
The Bob father is the pioneer. He blazed the trail for all hockey insiders. He once said to me in the early days, "Dregs, it's not what you think, it's what you know," right? As insiders. So I chirped LeBron a little bit about that. So you don't think that the Carolina Hurricanes should trade this piece. And I get it. So here's what we know. What we know is that Eric Tulsky, the general manager, is at least having trade conversations with teams around the NHL involving Mikko Rantanen. Doesn't mean that that's a decision that the organization is going to make. They may very well do exactly what Pierre LeBrun thinks they should do, and that's just sit tight and see if this guy can help them go deep into the playoffs, or better yet, win that Stanley Cup. And what I know is likely to happen in the next day or two is that Andy Scott, who represents Mikko Rantanen, is going to tell the brass of the Carolina Hurricanes, we're not making a decision on an extension before next Friday. So if you want to further engage in trade negotiations, well, that's up to you. If you want to trade Mikko, go ahead. If you want to include us and the potential of a sign-in trade so that maybe you get a little bit more and the player gets that 8th year, we're willing to do that too. If you want to blow off the deadline and again, just use them as an own rental, that's fine. No guarantee that Mikko is going to say see ya to the Carolina Hurricanes at the end of the year. Maybe by buying a little bit more time, he has a change of heart, or he's more comfortable in that environment and he does extend. So those are all scenarios that are still in play, but you cannot dismiss the possibility to trade, and we can't and won't until they either come out and say they're not trading him, or the deadline bell rings at 3:00 Eastern on Friday.
Well, and the thing I keep thinking about is that he gets traded. He's got 2 weeks there. Everything's new teammates.
Yeah.
He's hitting posts. Nothing's going in for him. And now the pressure gets ramped up because the counting stats aren't there. Not that he's playing bad necessarily, but the counting stats aren't there. Then he's at Four Nations for 2 weeks. He's away from the team. He's not in Raleigh. He's in Montreal. He's in Boston. He's hanging with his Finnish pals. And then he comes back to this trade fervor, and he is in a spotlight of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, he hasn't really settled in. Like, does he even know where his grocery store is, where he wants to live? Like, does he have a significant other that has a group of people to hang with? Like, he's so new there. They make this deal early, and you're like, oh, this is great, but he really hasn't had much time there.
No, and you know what? All of the above matters. It really does, and especially with a player like that who knows that he's going to have a top market when free agency comes around in July. He knows that, right? Because even though there's been some struggle, he was better in the last game, no doubt about that. But there has been some struggle. And as it was explained to me by someone close, it's almost like you do go through phases. And this is phase one for a player of that magnitude who was blindsided more or less by trade. And I know people don't believe that, but that's the truth. He thought that there'd be way more negotiating with the Colorado Avalanche. He thought that he'd be able to at least submit the idea of the discount and what that looks like in a number. And it never got to that stage, right? So he didn't think that this season was going to unfold the way that he has. So there are growing pains, and all of those things that are just lifestyle creature comforts, they can take a toll. But it does feel like, guys, that he's coming out of that a little bit, which, again, helps me revisit what I just said. I do expect that Andy Scott, who represents Rantanen, is going to say to Eric Tulsky or Tom Dundon, he's not going to make his call before next week. So we respect what you guys have to do, and he'll play hard for you as long as you want him to play. But there's no guarantee that he's going to stay long term.
Tough week for the Ottawa Senators, who have now lost 5 in a row.
Jeez.
Between losing a couple and then the Four Nations break and a Brady Tkachuk injury. And now all of a sudden they're 4 points back. It's crazy to think how your whole philosophy, if you're a GM, might change in the matter of 5 games. But I wonder if it has for Stevie Staios and the Senators.
I don't think so. And I said this on air the other day. I think Staios, provided that this group gets healthy, and that includes Brady, that includes Pinto, it includes Norris, as long as they get healthy, there's almost a want to protect that group and allow them to go through the experience and the investment that is required to first lock down a playoff spot in the East. I mean, it's going to be a wrestle with a bear to do that. It really is. And then if you're fortunate enough to do that, okay, experience gain for that young core. Now you go into the playoffs in a best of 7, and there's another layer of experience. So sure, I'm sure Staios is having big conversations. He is. There are rumors around the Ottawa Senators with all the center ice that they have and guys that are coming that maybe they could be in the market for one of these teams that are looking for a center. We'll find out. But the message that I got from management earlier this week was, they'd prefer to add depth pieces to do exactly what I said, give that young core an opportunity to push and experience what it takes. And then the hope is that Nick Cousins will come back into the fray, maybe by the start of the playoffs. And if he does, and he's able to contribute, that might feel like a bigger deal. So I don't want to close the door entirely on the possibility of a bigger trade involving the Ottawa Senators, but I didn't get that sense in an exchange with Steve Staios the other day.
Man, like they were rolling too. Wow.
Yeah.
I'll pivot a bit to Chicago. Yeah. We saw it. You could take little things and turn them into what they are, but we saw, Bedard get crumpled on the sideboards, and then he's sitting in the penalty box. And it's safe to say this has been a long year for the kid. And hey, get over it, I suppose. Life's pretty good still. Connor Bedard. But, Seth Jones had comments after the game, whatever it was, 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago. And, is he a guy at 30 that's attractive by trade? It just feels like it behooves the Blackhawks to do something maybe not by next Friday, but very quickly to make that environment a little bit more conducive for success for Bedard.
Right, but that's the tricky part when you're looking at Seth Jones. Yes, Kyle Davidson would like to get players back. They've got to start bringing some players in that are going to help Bedard. That's where they're at. And the problem with it is, the team that is dealing on Seth Jones is taking on a mammoth contract. Sure, there's going to be some form of salary retention. What is that going to cost? The pieces that you might have to include, is that going to impact your roster? And then the trickier part, and let's just revisit that comment that Seth Jones made the other day. And I understand his frustration, but he talked about how things haven't changed the last 4 years. Well, he's been there. He's been part of that, right? Was he talking about the coach? Was he talking about the manager? Is he talking about the Blackhawks in general, his teammates, himself, all of that? And so I understand his frustration and his want to win, but guys, he's only giving Kyle Davidson 1, 2, maybe 3 teams to work with because he has the full no trade protection. Well, if you really want out and you want to win, maybe you don't just pinpoint 1 or 2 teams. Maybe you say, look, here's a list of 8 teams that I'd be comfortable going to because I like the projection of that team. Oh, here's my top 4. These teams are all contenders. But I mean, when you handcuff the general manager with 1 or 2 teams, that's a tough spot. And then you verbally come out swinging that way. I don't know. That's a bit of a challenge.
A question I have is, Bedard's there. It's Chicago. When I came in, was terrible and it was boring and nobody really wanted to go to Chicago. It was rebranded. Taves, Kane, those guys win cups. Is Bedard good enough? And are the Blackhawks desirable enough for, I believe they have a lot of cap space for guys to want to go. Do you know what I mean? If McDavid's in Chicago, the free agents are running there to do it. Yeah. Is Bedard regarded highly enough to drag him in? And is Chicago itself, because for a while it was not a place you wanted to go, and then it was, yes, absolutely, I want to. What's the appeal to Chicago for free agents right now?
It's not very high, Rhett. It isn't very high, and that's just the reality of the situation. I'm told by multiple player agents Chicago is a tough sell, and that's disheartening. Because the number of times that I was around that city in their heyday with Taves and Kane and all the great Chicago Blackhawks players when they were buying and winning Stanley Cups, there is no better sports environment than that one. I mean, top shelf, just a wonderful city to be in for any sport when they're winning and they're vying for championships. Bedard hasn't proven yet that he's superstar quality. He hasn't. Now, is it possible? Sure. But what is evident is that, again, he needs help. He cannot do it alone. He can't throw this organization on his back. And, Boomer, you referred to him in the penalty box when, he's sitting there. He just takes a big sigh. I don't know that I can think of another time recently where I've seen somebody who just needed a hug more than Bedard did in the penalty box. Honestly, it didn't. I think I would have been more impressed if he just smashed his stick against the camera in the penalty box rather than it looked like he was ready to break into tears, just wearing the weight of the world on him. Everybody sees that. Everybody, ownership, upper management, the coaching staff, everybody. So I don't know how they fix it, because beyond Seth Jones, sure, they've got some younger pieces that might be attractive to the suitors, maybe between now and the deadline, certainly in the offseason. But it looks like the fix is going to be long in coming. So who knows? Maybe 2-3 years from now, we're looking at Connor Bedard as a completely different player, positively, not necessarily negatively. But what has to happen imminently is management's got to bring in some players, find a way to give this kid a fighting chance.
Has there been a more highly regarded draft pick left to his own devices as Connor Bedard? Like Eichel in Buffalo, maybe?
Even like Celebrini's got so much more to work with. It's wild.
Yeah, they had a plan for this. Chicago just said, we're going to draft Bedard, and away we go. It's ridiculous.
It's a good question. I mean, that was the guy that came to mind for me was Jack Eichel. But, you know, you think of the years that the Edmonton Oilers drafted first overall, but at least it inevitably ended up in Connor McDavid. And then the building around the pieces that they drafted around. I mean, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is still a very key contributing factor for the Edmonton Oilers. So it would probably be Eichel. But you know, again, that's why we're all hesitant. Nobody's trying to bury Connor Bedard.
No.
You know, he's way too young for that. And you can see the flashes of skill there, whereby, you know, if you flank him with some good pieces, then who knows after that? It's just Davidson's running out of bullets. Like he's running out of the assets needed.
Yeah. Like I wonder if they kind of misread the market. Hey, we're Chicago. Everyone knows what a great city we are. We're the Blackhawks.
Yeah, but even
look at the banners. Now we've got Bedard. Guys are definitely going to want to come here. To your point, I'm kind of surprised that guys wouldn't want to go to Chicago.
I'm a little surprised. I thought it would be more desirable.
Like I wonder,
tax situation, but some of the management stuff. Why did they fire Luke Richardson this year?
So quick.
Great question.
Like it made no sense. No. I actually know. I talked to someone. He gave me a reason. One of the reasons it sounded like it was a big reason, but it made no sense to me. I'm like, well,
they're not good. Why were you expecting them to be good?
Maybe talk to the coach and bring this up instead of kicking him out the door.
I mean, it was a head scratcher for sure for a bazillion different reasons. You know, you have to have a high character coach just to manage everything that you're going through when you're dragging through the mud, as the Chicago Blackhawks seem to do on a year after year basis here. And Luke is most definitely that. I mean, maybe they felt like they needed a different voice, obviously, but they needed.
How long was he there?
He wasn't there very long. No,
they loved him. They raved about the human, and then they gassed him when it was like, "Oh yeah, things are going." I was like, "Well, what did you think with this roster? They suck. You play your best players with Ryan Donato."
I'm honestly disheartened because, like you said, Dregs, Chicago, when it's good, is integral to the league.
Yeah,
like it's
so. Yeah, I you know, I'm surprised the Blackhawks haven't done this. And I like Kyle Davidson. He's a nice young guy. You know, happy to have a conversation with him, and I will. You know, coming up this month or in March at the GM meetings, but. That is an incredibly hard job to do, to be manager of a National Hockey League team, especially a team going through everything that the Blackhawks have had to go through. Sure, they've got, you know, Norm Maciver's there. They do have some experience that maybe helps the hockey operations. But look at, you know, some of the clubs around the National Hockey League. You know, Toronto has Brad Treliving, an experienced general manager. Oh, there's Brendan Shanahan as president. Like, look around the teams that have done a real good job of making sure, especially with inexperienced managers, that they've got experience to either flank or oversee. I mean, look at the two-headed monster in Montreal between Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes, for heaven's sake. Like, come on. Like, how Chicago has not given Kyle Davidson a mentor to work with, I'll never understand.
You mentioned it in the fall. You floated Ken Holland's name. I think it was you. And you're like, that would be a fit there because there's a young guy learning the ropes who's clearly very smart. And there's a guy that on the other side that maybe isn't up to speed on the newer side of management with the cap and analytics and all that, but has been through all these situations. Like they need that guy.
Yeah. And I don't know if Kenny would be open to Chicago at this stage. You know, he's working inside hockey operations for the NHL, but that's not his dream job. It's just something to keep him busy. He still says the juices are there, man. He wants to be involved. And a president's role would be perfect for him in a meaningful way. And, you know, that would be a challenge in Chicago. So I'm not speaking on behalf of Kenny Holland, but back then, I think it made a ton of sense because you're looking at the year ahead. You're looking at, you know, a Bedard who had to be ready to roll in the fall. Like, let's get going here. I want to prove everybody in the world that I'm up there with some of the best. But here we are encroaching on the trade deadline and trying to pick the pieces of a broken puzzle up in Chicago. So maybe Kenny looks at the Blackhawks and goes, that might be more work than I want to take on. But somebody's going to snap him up, and they should, because – you know, that Hall of Fame resume is exactly what the Chicago Blackhawks need.
Really quick thought on Bedard. Has he ever had a season where he hasn't won like double the number of games he's lost? until he got to Chicago. Like you see this face.
Yeah.
This is the first time he's done it. Like the Pats were a wagon in junior. I'm sure the North Shore Winter Club, where the hell he was playing, like if you have Connor Bedard, you're the best team in the league. That's kind of his whole life. All of a sudden, they're the worst team in the league 2 years in a row.
Yeah. You know what, though, too? And this shouldn't matter, but I think it does because he's a young guy. And I'm reminded of Elias Pettersson and his comment the other day to Ian McIntyre that, well, I'm actually annoyed by the media. I'm not worried necessarily about a lack of confidence and how that's influencing that game. I'm annoyed by the media. And I look at poor Bedard and I don't watch a ton of Blackhawks games. I mean, he's the reason that you watch Blackhawks games because of the skill set. But man, every play this kid makes that ends up, being a turnover or just a mistake, a flat out mistake, gets scrutinized and amplified. But that's a National Hockey League. Sorry, man. I mean, you got to be better. And you have to learn every aspect of the game that is going to make you better. So he probably feels like he's been kicked in the shins 1,000 different ways. But in the long run, if he embraces all of it, he'll be a better player.
This is a tough one to throw at you right at the end, and I don't want to keep you too long because we're right up kind of on it here for you. But it's 5 straight losses now for the Oilers as well as they lose again. I saw that Todd McClellan kind of went after Dylan Larkin last night. He's like, hey, he's just not present right now. Four Nations being what it is, and that was a whole big thing, but we're removed from that. And I know that McDavid was kind of saying, it's hard for me to.
They should have taken some days off. I don't know what
they play him Saturday,
guys
Sunday
are thinking.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's tied in, but it's another thing, a week out from a very important, it feels like, deadline for the Oilers. And I just wonder for the brain trust there, maybe things that you weren't thinking about doing 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. Maybe we do need.
They're thinking about a goalie.
Maybe we do need a goalie. I just wonder where their headspace is at.
I can tell you what I know here again. That owner, Daryl Cates, runs hot all the time. He runs hot. So there's no doubt that Jeff Jackson is getting called 20 times a day. And by extension, Stan Bowman, the general manager, looking for answers. And I get it. I mean, it has to be a frustrating time for everyone there. Where do you start? Bowman keeps wanting to defend the goaltending, and I get it. I mean, it's the same goaltending tandem that got him to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. All right, well, if it's not your goaltending, then is it a porous defense? Not just defense, but structurally how you play? Well, maybe, but, nobody's going after the coaching staff, which I think is fair game here. I don't think that this is the coach's fault, but something has to give because the number of goals that this team has allowed since the Four Nations break ended is off the scale. Like, it's almost unbelievable how porous they are. So in a perfect world, they'd add a defenseman, they'd add a shutdown forward. And I think they are kicking tires on goaltending, despite what, Stan Bowman keeps telling me and others. I don't know how you can't. When you're in the predicament that the Oilers are in right now, with the mountain of expectation ahead of them, I think you have to be involved in all of those conversations.
Okay. Last one, because I know we're up on it.
Yeah.
Rasmus Andersson likes it in Calgary. He wants to resign here. Craig Conroy, I think, really likes Rasmus Andersson.
Yeah.
All that said, what are the odds that, because here's the thing, like, you can't extend the guy to the summer. You haven't probably really got into trading numbers yet. What are the odds the Calgary Flames view year 30 through 37, which would be an 8-year extension, the same way that Rasmus Andersson's camp views what could be his last contract in the NHL? So they can like each other, but until we trade numbers, like, they haven't really started. Like, you can like each other's great, but what are the odds they actually value this contract the same way?
Well, probably not good right now, but I also don't think that it's a worry or a concern for Craig Conroy. I don't. I think that there's, if I'm putting a percentage chance, it'd be below 5% that this guy gets dealt between now and next Friday. I agree. I think they're more than happy to push this forward into June and see where you're at that point. And if at that point it becomes evident to the organization that this just isn't going to work, given our concern with the midpoint, the latter stages of a mega contract, all right, well, you make that call then. There'll be plenty of suitors for Rasmus Andersson if or when Craig Conroy puts him in play, but it's not going to be this week.
And I assume you have something next Friday? We won't, I don't know.
Yeah, that's going to be, I'm going to be jammed up. Unless you guys why don't you do a morning show and I'll come on at like 5 or 6 a.m.
Perfect. I'll just be getting in.
Love that idea.
No. Jack, we'll sleep on the couch. We do that here. That's great.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Maybe
we're gonna be eating meats.
Yeah, we're gonna have the meat sweats.
You're invited.
Yeah, we're gonna do our own trade deadline coverage.
Are you?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
With the smoker going?
Yeah. We'll have some meat brought in.
Beef ribs.
We got a cooler full of beer just dying to be drank.
There's a lot of coverage of people that are sober, Dregs. We got to find our niche, you know?
Okay, you got to go with the trifecta here. You've got to have the smoker going, the barbecue, nothing wrong with the rotisserie. You can put like a prime rib on there. You can put whatever you want on the rotisserie. And then the turkey deep fryer, boys.
Wow. Turkey dries so easily. Deep fries.
No. You have to brine and then you have to inject with all sorts of goodness. Just let that thing soak for a couple of days and it'll be beautiful. Trust me.
Did the Bob father teach you that? The dean of
to get that in?
That's good stuff.
Insider school?
No, that's good old prairie stuff. That
is good stuff. Love you,
Dregs. My eyebrows off with a deep fryer one.
You got to sacrifice for success, Dregs. You got to sacrifice for success.
I dropped the turkey in, and my eyebrows kind of went the other way.
That was you on YouTube, hey? I've seen those videos.
Yeah, it could have been.
Tough one, yeah.
Appreciate you, pal.
Boys.
Yeah, we'll talk to you. There he is, Darren Dreger, TSN.
Hey, guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long-form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And, of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.